Hello. We're going to start now, so everybody that's standing up at the edges, you can come on and sit down. All right. Welcome to the 2009 Deming Lecture. I'm John Bushry from the Deming Lectureship Committee, and Stu Hunter will give the lecture, and it'll be Deming today. But before he does that, I'm going to give you some background about the Deming Lecture Award, and I'm going to then tell you a bunch of nice things about Dr. Hunter, and then ASA President Sally Morton will present the award to Dr. Hunter and a plaque. And I'd also like to thank the other members of the Deming Lectureship Committee for everything that they've done, in particular, Nicholas Fisher, who's the chair of the committee but couldn't be here today. The Deming Lecture Award was established in 1995, and its purpose is to honor the accomplishments of Dr. W. Edwards Deming, to recognize the contributions of the award recipient, and to enhance the awareness of Dr. Deming's philosophy and methods among the statistical community. And finally, to promote a wider acceptance and application of Dr. Deming's methods. The criteria for the award are knowledge of Dr. Deming's methods, significant contributions in the fields in which Dr. Deming worked. You don't have to be an ASA member to receive the award, and the lecture should be presented in the spirit of Dr. Deming's views on statistical practice. Now, if you're interested in nominating somebody for the award, or serving on the committee, or just want to know a little bit more about the committee, you can go to the ASA website, and on the screen in the upper right portion, there's a link for committees. Click on that, and then you can navigate down to the Deming Lectureship Committee. Now, this is the 14th Deming Lecture. The first award went to Brian Joyner in 1996, and last year's recipient was Donald Berwick. As I mentioned, this year the Deming Lectureship has been awarded to Dr. J. Stuart Hunter, Professor Emeritus of Princeton University. Dr. Hunter's had a long career in academia, mostly at Princeton, and he's now, as I said, Professor Emeritus at Princeton School of Engineering and Applied Science. He's a fellow of the American Statistical Association, the American Society for Quality, the Royal Statistical Society, and the American Society for the Advancement of Science. And Dr. Stewart's career has focused on industrial applications of statistics. And he's written textbooks such as Statistics for Experimenters, which he co-authored with G.E.P. Box and W.G. Hunter. And this is a classic text in industrial statistics with over 100,000 copies sold. He also co-authored Introductory Engineering Statistics with S.S. Wilkes and wrote Design of Experiments. He's given innumerable lectures on experimental design techniques, and he's written over 50 refereed papers for various publications. Dr. Hunter has put in a lot of service to the statistical profession. He's a founding editor of Technometrics. He's been active in the ASA, having served as president, vice president, on the board of directors, and on many committees. Dr. Hunter has also served on the board of the directors of the Duran Foundation, on the National Academy of Sciences, on the board of the Ott Foundation, and on the board of the Quality and Productivity Research Conference. In addition to the Deming Lectureship, Dr. Hunter has received recognition for his leadership in the field from the American Society for Quality with the Brumbaugh Award in 1959 and again in 1985, also from the ASQ, the Schuhart Medal in 1970, and the Ellis Ott Award in 1978, and he received the Deming Medal from the ASQ Metropolitan Section in 1986. Finally, he received the S.S. Wilkes Medal from the United States Army in 1987. Now, Sally Morton, president of the ASA, will present Dr. Hunter with the award and plaque.
Good afternoon. I have the honor of presenting the award, and I'd like to read its citation. Sorry, there's a slide here so you can read it as well. There it is. To J. Stuart Hunter, for his monumental contributions to the advancement of statistics in business and industry for over 50 years, his astute and tireless leadership of numerous important endeavors to promote statistics and quality, and his unswerving dedication to Dr. Deming's principles. Please join me in congratulating J. Stuart Hunter. You need to come out here for a wonderful photo. Thank you. Congratulations. I'll put that right here for you.
Okay, good. Good.
Do you have slides?
Yes, I have slides.
Okay, let's see if is that your first one? Yes, I think it is.
Nope, yes, I guess that is it. And is this the gizmo?
Yes. I think you press that. Okay. Let's go out of here. Sorry.
We'll be with you in a moment.
Okay.
Got it?
Is that it?
Can I use this now?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can. I think click that one there. There you
Oh,
go.
great, there we go. Great. Well, thank you, Sally and Bill, John. Well, to begin, to get launched on this, I knew Dr. Deming many, many years ago. When we had the Princeton conferences back in the late 80s, 50s, and early 60s and so forth, I'd go down and meet Ed Deming at the railroad station, bring him home for dinner, and he'd play with our kids and so forth. He was a very cordial, pleasant sort of character. And then the next morning at the meetings, why he would just be formidable. He would just destroy all the speakers he possibly could. He was a very, very tough guy when it came to making a presentation. A remarkable guy altogether. He was born in Sioux City, Iowa, and grew up, however, in Cody, Wyoming, which is a place just barely emerging in the early 1900s from the Wild West. His father was well educated, but a worker for the railroad companies, and his mother taught piano, and Ed became known as a young man as a very good student. And here's a picture of, if I can get this thing to work, gang. Here's a picture of Ed just before he went to school at the University of Wyoming, where he studied electrical engineering, and later on proceeded down to the University of Colorado to take a master's degree in mathematics and physics. The summers of 25 and 26, he went to work for the Hawthorne plant, in Hawthorne Western Electric plant, and was there. What they were doing there, they were assembling hundreds and hundreds of telephones out of thousands and thousands of little bits and pieces. And he became aware of the work of a physicist by the name of Walter Shewhart. And this physicist had studied carefully what could be done to improve the quality of manufactured products. And so apparently very early on, Ed Deming became aware of Walter Shewhart's work and became somewhat fascinated by it. He went to Yale to study, once again, mathematics and physics, and got a PhD there eventually, but just before graduating, he took an appointment at the Fixed Nitrogen Research Laboratory of the Department of Agriculture. And it turned out that one of the directors of that group was a close friend of Walter Shewhart, and he made a special effort of getting Dr. Deming and Shewhart together. I don't know how Dr. Deming managed to do this in such a short period of time, but he was able to wangle a sabbatical in 1930 at the University of London, and when he was there, he took up the subject of statistics. And beyond a doubt, I suspect that was a conditioned by his talks and conversations with Shewhart. And when he returned to the United States, he ended up giving lectures at the United States Department of Agriculture's graduate school, and he was lecturing in mathematics and statistics, and he had some money, and so he used this money to import statisticians from abroad to give a series of seminars. And here are some of the individuals that Dr. Deming managed to bring here to Washington, D.C. to talk at Beltsville, Maryland, just up the road here a bit. Fisher, Jersey Neyman, Jack Wishart, Frank Yates, and of course Walter Shewhart. In the lectures that Walter Schuhart gave, Deming worked over those lectures and collaborated with Professor Schuhart in putting out this fundamental book on the statistical methods from the viewpoint of quality control back in 1939. That's some time ago. He left there to go to the United States Bureau of Census, and of course you would not be surprised to learn that he published papers on sampling errors and errors in punch cards. It's also interesting that during this period and prior, he became interested in inverse probability. He had Bayes' original work translated into English. He did work on various methods, new methods, alternative methods at least for fitting parametric models and so on. He was productive at the theoretical level as well as at the applied level. He later moved on to the Bureau of the Budget and so on. The big event in his career, and the one we're most famous for, is his emphasis of his work during World War II. The war had just opened up, and he was very sensitive to the need for quality product, mass-produced quality products. And so he sent a letter to Alan Wallace. Now, Alan Wallace was president of the American Statistical Association. He was a longtime editor at JASA. But Alan Wallace is also very important here in Washington. He knew his way around the political machinery here. And he writes Alan Wallace a letter requesting that they plan to hold a school on Schuhart methods with courses open to engineers, inspectors, and industrial people. Now catch the rest of this, with or without mathematical or statistical training. And this immediately generated a tremendous series of courses taught throughout all of industry here in the United States. And many of those individuals who picked up the subject and learned to teach it and so forth, they all, after the war, came together to form the American Society for Quality Control. That's where all that energy came from, actually, these men and women who taught statistics to all these many, many individuals. Post-war, he was asked to go to Greece to help with the census. Some of you maybe remember post-war, there was great danger of Greece falling into the hands of the communists and so on. And President Truman coming before Congress and asking for the extraordinary sum of $400 billion to save the Mediterranean for the Western world in a sense. At any rate, Dr. Deming was invited to go there to help with the Greek census. And the story is that while he was there, he received a telegram, apparently from no less a person than General MacArthur, to come to Japan to help with the census. And while he was then in Japan helping with the census, he did have an opportunity to address a very sensitive group of leadership in Japanese industry about the importance of quality products and the importance of quality management. And that meeting was sponsored by the Japanese Union of Science and Juice in 1950. But we must go back just a little bit and go back a few years and recognize that the groundwork that permitted Dr. Deming to take off with such energy and such success had been laid earlier by two gentlemen, Homer Sorensen and Charles Protzman. Sorensen was charged by General MacArthur to do something about the communications industry in Japan. It was in complete destruction. There were no telephones, there were no radios, there were no radio stations. And so this gentleman took on the responsibility of restructuring a Japanese industry, at least Japanese communication industry. And of course, you're going to build radios and telephones and so forth. And you're going to draw down upon the talents and so forth that were evident earlier in the United States. And so there was a great deal of work prepared in advance of Dr. Deming by these two gentlemen. And as a matter of fact, they were both, in a sense, responsible for the establishment of JUICE. So the invitation from JUICE to Deming and so forth, has these men in many ways responsible. We give them responsibility for that happy event. And here's a picture of Dr. Deming in 1950, full of vigor, full of vector, ready to take on the Japanese Empire. When Dr. Deming was offered the chance to do these courses, he insisted on having an 8-day course for the workers on the floor And he wanted an 8-day course. He wanted them to concentrate. He wanted to have them completely under his control. And that was arranged. And he also wanted a similar series of lectures for management. And the thing about the size of these classes, the worker class was limited to 200, and then the management class was limited to 20, and those limitations were essential because, from what I've been told, he was almost always oversubscribed. In 1951, Juice established the Deming Prize and the Deming Application Prize. They're the names of the two people. The Michiru Sakami, 2008 member of the prize, that's the medal, and the Deming Application Prize was won by Tata Steel from Industries, an industrial prize. Deming got the highest possible award that the emperor can give a non-citizen of Japan. And it turns out over that 10-year period, he made over 30 trips to Japan. And I've seen the picture of Dr. Deming arriving at the airport at the arrival building emblazoned with a sign saying, "Welcome, Dr. Deming." And there's this fence, and behind the fence are all these people and these children, and they're all carrying bouquets. The man had become a star. The only thing to sit, and the Japanese were just overwhelmed by his presence, and I'm sure Dr. Deming enjoyed every minute of that adoration. Here's the Deming Prize. It's a silver medal, and that's handed out to all the individuals. And I'm duty-bound to reflect on somebody else who was also a participant in this tremendous interest upon the part of the Japanese government and Japanese people in turning out quality product. And Joe Duran comes immediately to mind. He lectured simultaneously over much the same area, emphasizing quality management more than the actual statistical tools of quality. And Joe Duran died just a few months ago at the age of 103. But another real leader, and he demands our respect and acknowledgement of his role in this activity in Japan. And it is interesting when you think about what they were doing in Japan. Believe it or not, they actually gave nationwide radio courses on quality control. They taught these people how to make histograms and Schuhart charts. And can you imagine? All on 200, and then the documentation of this is that Juice was managed to sell some 200,000 manuscripts of what the programs were all about. And then in 1959, they repeated these courses nationwide on television. So the body politic, the average citizen of Japan really knew that there was something going on with respect to quality, and he had certain responsibilities, personal responsibilities, to see that that was accomplished. Of course, during the next 20 years or so, Japanese industry makes very significant inroads on the production of machine tools, automobiles, radios, television sets, and consumers' goods within the United States. And the United States industry is suffering from the influx of, cheap is the wrong word, cheap means tinsely, economical, high-quality goods. And we were all really suffering. That isn't to say that there wasn't plenty going on in the United States over that very same period of time. The Quality Control Organization is principally responsible. There were extensive courses taught all over the country on acceptance sampling, on Schuhart charts. Stu Hunter went around and gave course after course after course on design of experiments, industrial applications, thank you, quality control groups. And even George Box and I went out and gave courses on evolutionary operation. The chemical division of the American Society for Quality was principally responsible for organizing and granting these. Of course, the ASA and ASQ meetings had sessions on the problems of quality and the statistical problems of quality. And then at the Gordon conferences and the Princeton conference and so forth. And it's nice to recognize that very, very early on in 1954, just very shortly after the war period, the ASA established a section of physical and engineering sciences. I well remember John Tukey was our first chair. And then in 1959, technometrics came to life. And in 1969, the Journal of Quality Technology. So that there was plenty going on here in the United States, but in a sense, it wasn't getting anywhere. The pot would not boil. And then the big event occurred. On the 24th of June, 1980, NBC planned a 90-minute program on If Japan can, why can't we? If Japan can turn out quality product, why in the devil can't we? And they went to interview Dr. Deming in his office in the basement of his home, just a few miles up the road here in Washington. And Dr. Deming just took over. If you've ever met Dr. Deming, you can imagine the situation. He could humble an executive just like that. I mean, he had a device, a mechanism, an art for really dominating the situation. And he just dominated this television show. There was no back and forth chit-chat between questioner and answer. No siree, Dr. Deming took over. And it was a tremendous success. And he actually wowed the audience. And his message was, you can't blame the worker for the lack of quality. The person responsible for the lack of quality in the United States of America, by golly, are the managers. And he just chewed the managers out something fierce. And overnight, he became literally a star here in the United States. One consequence of his fame was he had endless opportunities to consult and give lectures and so forth. And he organized a 4-day short course and seminar based on several of the books. These books kept coming along as he got older and older. And they were repeated many, many times to big audiences all over the United States. Interestingly, and you know, Dr. Deming was driven to get this message over. And an illustration how serious that drive was. The last course was given on December 7th to 10, 1993, and 17 days later, exhausted, he passed on. There's the Deming Medal that they give here in the United States, and that's something like the one they give in Japan, except this one's bronze and that one's silver. And I want to talk just ever so briefly about another parallel set of events that occur over the century that defines Dr. Deming, and that have to do with computers and computing. And I want to show you how statisticians did their work back in the early days. Here's Gossett. Of course, he's just the 100th anniversary of this book in the paper on the derivation of a t-test, effectively. What to do if n is small? What do you do when you have small sample data? And that's how Gossett did his work, by hand. And here's how Fisher did his work, by punching into an adding machine. And here's how my generation, as young people, did our work. We had the punch cards, and if we were lucky, we had something as fancy as a Monroe-matic, which could multiply very quickly, and some could even take sums of squares. And then later on, there was the ENIAC, the Potter counter, a device that could count in 1/100,000th of a second. And then later on, there were memory drums, and we had fancier machines like the UNIVAC and the IBM 650. And I'd like to say that once in my career, I actually ran the ENIAC for a period of 26 hours at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Thank you, Frank Grubbs. We tabulated the Hotelling's generalized t-square statistic on that machine. Of course, the real change comes with the invention of the transistor and its applications, and the other real change comes from the creation of the internet, for which we have to thank President Eisenhower. And today, we have our personal computers and our laptops and remarkable instruments like the iPhone, and even more remarkable devices. There's a library, and there's a flash drive, and one is equivalent to the other. That all this has happened within the century, so there have been profound changes. And of course, the other interesting thing is just over the horizon now, as we start talking about cloud computing, about platforms of devices in the air that we can quickly access, storage capacities approaching infinity, software applications running around begging to be used, and wide accessibility by the everyday person. And that general idea, of course, has been discussed in this wonderful paper on the future of statistical consulting by Leland Wilkinson back in the Technometrics back a couple issues ago. He forecasts, or they forecast him, they're communicating data systems handling massive data sets and non-tabular structures, data systems making inferences and drawing conclusions, data systems accessible to the non-statistician. It's absolutely staggering. And the thing to keep in mind is we always underestimate the rate of technological change and what it takes, what responsibilities we have in just keeping up. I'd like to bring you right up to 2009 now. I attended a meeting of the National Academy of Engineers in Durham at Duke University, and the subject of the meeting was grand challenges for engineering, and they listed 15 grand challenges. Fusion, clean water, improving the urban infrastructure, one thing after another. But one of the topics they picked, one of the grand challenges called medical and health informatics. And I'm a bit embarrassed to say that was the first time I really ran right into the word informatics, which in this particular instance was defined as a systematic acquisition, management, and use of data in health and medicine. A more careful research on the word informatics tells me that it's the science and practice of the collection, organization, preservation, dissemination, you can read as fast as I can, classification, referencing, storage, processing, accessibility, communication of data, digital or otherwise. But there's something going on simultaneously. Back in the 70s and finally really coming together in the late 1980s is a society called the American Medical Informatics Association. And they have a journal, and it's a very fine journal. I've had a chance to review that journal. This is an organization consists principally of medical workers, physicians, people closely aligned to the medical industry. It has a membership of about 4,000 people, and it has a college now of people picked out particularly of about 500 individuals. And parallel with that is another organization out there in the world beyond the ASA, the Healthcare Information and Management Science Management Systems Society. It's the healthcare industry's membership organization providing on industry is the key word here, class. It's the healthcare industry's membership organization, okay? Focused on providing global leadership, et cetera, et cetera. I'll tell you what this organization is, HIMSS. It's the principal, I've lost a word. It's the principal, what is it? The company, it's the principal, damn it. I'll get it in a minute, all right? Advocate of lobby, there it is, that's the word I was looking for. The principal lobby for all things pertaining to medical informatics here in Washington, D.C. And it campaigns persistently on arranging things of benefit for the industry, the people that manufacture the instruments that monitor us, the computers, the computing facilities, and so forth, appropriate to the medical industry. Of course, there are many journals in this general area, and here's a handful of them. I suppose I should have put biometrics in here. I didn't, but I now remember that I should have put biometrics. These are journals in the area of informatics, medicine, biology. You can see once again. And then what surprised me, really surprised me, the number of academic programs that there are in informatics or bioinformatics or health informatics or social informatics. There's even a program in dentistry informatics at the many universities throughout the country. And I announce here that starting in September of this year, Johns Hopkins, well, you can apply for a master's degree, a Master of Science degree in applied, mind you, health science informatics. Not that the American Statistical Association has been behind on these past many years. There are lots of sections that have intersections with the problems of medicine and health and so on. Of course, the two that stand out are the section on health policy and statistics and so on. The health policy and statistics section has as its objective improving the quality of health care in the United States through the use of quantitative statistical methods. Bravo. And they have a journal, Health Services and Outcome Research Methodology. And interestingly, there's this wonderful international conference that they help manage. It meets every 2 years. And the ICHIPS conference, International Conference on Health Policy. So I don't want you to think that the statistical fraternity has been necessarily left behind or not in the picture. We are. The interesting thing about this meeting was I got a copy of the program, and it's just like every American Statistical Association meeting. Lots of parallel sessions, and everybody has 15 or 20 minutes. And there are 100 papers all jammed into 2 days. And so it's a real statistics meeting, no doubt. And I did a word search on all the papers and so on, and I put in the word informatics, and I came up with 0 replies. And of course, there's good old technometrics. And even they are aware, not even they are certainly aware of the changes and the importance of information sciences. And now and back just a few issues ago, we had a special issue on statistics and and information technology. But the word informatics doesn't appear there anywhere. And now we come to the big event, class. The thing that really happened, right, that makes a difference to all of us, right? Here's the president's first weekly address. To lower healthcare costs and cut medical errors and to improve care, we'll computerize the nation's health records in 5 years, hopefully saving billions of dollars in healthcare costs and countless lives. And there's the legislation that was finally passed on February 19th. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. And here's Title 13, Health Information Technology. Title 33 has to do with health information technology and quality, and happily NIST is explicitly mentioned in that particular section. But the most interesting part of this particular slide is the ARRA provides $19.2 billion for healthcare information technology. Now, I'll bet you all caught that. Resources, real resources to be spent in this endeavor. And now we reflect back on the informatics side of the equation. What's going on over there? Here's a booklet that was put out by the National Academies, National Research Council, sponsored by the National Library of Medicine, published by the National Academies Press, came out in about February of this year. Computational Technologies for Effective Healthcare. And the people writing this particular report were all professionals in computer technology and computer science and in medicine, getting together, writing this report. Wonderfully handy for the new legislation just about to come out. And here are some key extractions from the 114-page document. Health biomedical informatics is more than a medical computer science, drawing also on the decision, cognitive, and information sciences, as well as, and then they list all these things, engineering, organizational theory, and sociology. There's not a mention of the word statistics. I commented on this to a friend, and he said, "Oh, Stu, there wasn't any mention of the word mathematics either, so don't be so sensitive." And maybe the word cognitive is a key word. It means somebody's thinking about the data. But to go on, the quote, advances in computer science and related disciplines, there's a chance we're still in the fight, will lead to new ways of extracting meaningful and useful knowledge from existing data sources. But here's the one that really drove me up the wall. Biomedical informaticians have worked for decades on the problem of how best to summarize and present data using visual methods. Now that really made me angry. What about Mr. Playfair, or coming up today? What about John Tukey and Bill Cleveland and Ed Tufte and all these other guys? And what's this new word? Informaticians. And then to sort of fix my mental attitude, Dr. Friedman is head of the Office of National Coordination for Health Information at the Department of Health and Human Services. And just a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, in the Journal of the American Informatics Society, he published this paper called A Fundamental Theorem of Biomedical Informatics. And there, emblazoned in red border, is the fundamental theorem that the mind plus the computer is greater than the mind alone. Now, it doesn't take, you don't have to be very deep in statistics before you realize that the inequality sign could easily be turned the other way. And so I thought I'd add a little bit to the conversation. The fundamental theorem of biomedical informatics is the mind and the computer and some statistical thinking. Right? Now we stand a chance of enhancing the abilities and the knowledge in the mind of the observer. And so what's the scientific method, or scientific statistical thinking? Now, I know Ron Snee is probably in the audience here someplace. Ron Snee, and there's Roger Hurl. So these two characters labored long and hard to get the American Society for Quality to make formal the definition of statistical thinking. And their definition of statistical thinking is a little bit narrower than this, since they had as their focus the industrial world and manufacturing processes. Statistical thinking was an idea that all work was a sequence of operations and so forth, all subject to variability, and contemplating that sequence of processes statistically was a good idea. But I'm going to broaden the definition, if you don't mind, of statistical thinking. Very simply, the scientific method is a statistical process. Information must be extracted from the observations. Hypotheses must be postulated. You must be searching for something. Models must be fitted and checked. And a model isn't worth much unless it's useful for forecasting, so we need to make forecasts. And we need to attach to those forecasts uncertainty measures. And then lucid exposition, good graphics, good explanations are required. And through this process, knowledge is accumulated. And I can say all this in more lay terms. The scientific method is a statistical process. Why? Because we see in the dark of the data and therefore suffer uncertainty. Furthermore, data is information contaminated by noise. And lots of data, the information level is close to zero. It's all noise. And then there's another quote. There's never been a signal in the absence of noise. And so as a statistician, we learn to model the signal. We learn to study the noise. We learn to forecast as a basis and apply standard errors. And we learn to compare the forecast to future observations in order to check on the adequacy of our models. So I don't believe it's such a bad stretch to say that the scientific method is a statistical process. And what might the good Dr. Deming say? Well, I can imagine what he would say. I wrote it down, but given the fact that the 2009 survey found that only 17% of doctors currently use electronic record systems, I suspect Dr. Deming would start off with a letter to Dr. Friedman at the Department of Health and Human Services, a letter very similar to the one he sent to Alan Wallace some 60 years earlier. The letter would propose establishing a school open to nurses, doctors, and hospital personnel with little or no prior statistical standing. A course designed to meet the nation's problems with health care. A course that would emphasize statistical thinking, enhanced by the computer and computer software. And what would be the audience for this particular course, right? Well, there are 7,500 hospitals, there are 800,000 physicians, 2.5 million nurses, 500,000 practical nurses, and all the rest of us. Okay. Unfortunately, Dr. Deming's message to Dr. Friedman would arrive a bit late. The AMIA, the American Medical Information Association, is already supporting an active education program called 10 by 10, aimed at the medical audience. It plans to teach the practice of informatics to over 10,000 students within this year. Now, I'm persuaded that the collection, organization, and distribution of health and medical data and the ancillary use of computers is important and is very worthy of all the energetic efforts that society is employing. But as a statistician, I truly envy the AMIA's opportunity to say something about the combined role of informatics and statistical thinking. About this time, I was talking to Bob Hogue on the telephone not too very long ago, and he can't be with us. And so on behalf of Bob Hogue and all his friends, he sends you his best wishes. And if he were here, he'd probably sing, well, at any rate, we'll put it that way. But here's Bob Hogue on statistical education. I grabbed one of his papers. Improvements are badly needed. Good statistics is not equated with mathematical rigor or purity, but more closely with careful thinking. Statistics is part of the endless cycle associated with the scientific method. Or, if you like, statistics is part of the plan, do, check, act cycle. Of course, plan, do, act, check is also called the Deming cycle. And so you see, we recycle back in our thinking and our conversation to that very unusual gentleman. Now, there's something else. Oh, I had something further to read here. Yeah. But I doubt if Dr. Deming would stop at emphasizing the importance of a proper statistical education. He would also return to his favorite refrain, that the worker, it's not the worker who fails to deliver quality, it's the manager who fails. And this time, he might be right on target. Here's a brief summary of what the AMIA workforce, same organization, produced in a white paper, March 2009. And here it is. And it says, while recognizing that there are still technical issues related to the functionality and interoperability discussion, blah, 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 our discussion affirmed the emerging consensus that the problems are more and more managerial than technical. And that begins to sound a great deal like Dr. Deming speaking once again. Now, there have been some very real, sincere efforts at applying standard quality, statistical quality control methods, Six Sigma methods, lean methods to the problems faced by the medical fraternity. And many of them are discussed in this little booklet here on solutions to healthcare quality circles. And the black print says cases and examples of lean Six Sigma in healthcare. And the editor of the book is Soren Bisgaard, and describes the applications of these simple statistical techniques and methods of thinking to hospitals and so forth in Europe. And so we now find ourselves in the following interesting situation. Many years ago, how to proceed with respect to improving industrial quality came to us, come across the seas, the Pacific. And now it seems that the same sort of assistance and so forth will come to us across the seas again, except this time it'll be the Atlantic. But there's one more thing to say, class, to bring you right up to date. And that is the ASA Board of Directors has approved certification for statisticians. When I was president of this society in 1993, I made a strenuous effort to see if I could get certification established as one of the proper functions of a professional society. And I had two audiences in mind for certification. Certainly, I felt that the college graduate, the academic owner of a degree in statistics and so forth, might, under certain circumstances, require a certification. so that when he gave testimony in court or we approached in some sort of serious situation, we could say, but this man has really and truly qualified in the minds of the profession. But I had a second audience in mind at that time as well. And at that time, if you would read my presidential address, you will find a plot which shows the remarkable increase in membership in the ASQC as opposed to the decreasing membership in the American Statistical Association. And why was that rising in the ASQC and falling in the ASA? And the answer came back because the ASQC was going about teaching the principles of statistics to the industrial community, and they were picking up membership through their statistical offerings that they had. And that all gradually developed into what we now call the Black Belt program and the Green Belt program and all those procedures. So we missed our opportunity there. And so I have a hope, at any rate, that perhaps the certification of statisticians can look ahead to the medical community, those 800,000 doctors, those 7,500 hospitals and so forth, and guarantee or help try to guarantee that when the statistics is being used in those environments, that in fact they will have something they can depend upon by way of reports. I would like to see is the society think in terms of certifying what, help me, who is it? Parastatisticians. Come on, gang, somebody help me. Brian Joyner, there we are, got it. Brian Joyner used the word parastatisticians back in those days. I'd rather call these people statists. And what we as statists, not necessarily trained in the formalities, full formalities of academic statistics, but an individual who without formal academic degrees in statistics, these individuals daily employ statistical methodology and software in the workplace. And what might the responsibility of a statist be in the medical environment? The statist might indeed be responsible for the electronic gathering, combining, storage, and making accessible hospital records. That's his informatics responsibility. This is a role presently defined as informatics. But the major responsibility would be the uncovering of information in the medical record, employing both the immediate data and the vast historical record available. What does a reference distribution of similar events have to tell us? Are there anomalies in the immediate data? What diagnoses were proposed and what medicines prescribed? What graphics might help the physician in his decision-making? These search, identify, and communicate responsibilities far exceed those of simple data collection and storage. They require skills in the arts of statistics, along with an appreciation for the role of the scientific method, and of course the use of the computer together, with the use of the computer, all within the milieu of medicine, if you will. And when I started out this talk, I was thinking this way, that there's the statistical sciences and computer sciences, and we have a large overlap. And those people who are not fully academically trained in either of the sciences, but nevertheless find themselves employed in these areas, apparently are going to be called informatists on the part of the computer scientists. And they're going to be called statists, I trust, or something like that, if they're associated with statisticians. But what I fear, given the energy coming from across the street, that this is what we're going to find going on. And that the role of the statistician, the applied statistician, well, he'll now just be an informatist. And we will lose an opportunity to build our society, our professional society, as a consequence. And that's my message, and I have a sneaking suspicion that W. Edwards Deming, well, he'd give me a hard time, but I don't think he'd give me that hard a time, okay? Thank you very much for your attention.
tell them.
Got time?
Yeah, we got plenty of time. If you have any questions, there's microphones in each of these aisles running front to back, and they're about 1/3 of the way from the front. So if you have questions, please come up to the microphone to ask it. And can you see them to pick them? Sure. Okay.
You know what happens when the students don't ask questions, don't you? You give them a test.
I certainly wouldn't want that to happen.
I can't see. Oh, good.
Hi, my name's John Gardenier. I'm retired, quote, statistician who probably would never be certified, but I think I'm a little more than a statist. My question is this. Given that Dr. Deming, throughout his career, right up to just a few months before he died, as you pointed out in your very excellent lecture, was constantly reaching out beyond the statistics community, not saying only statisticians can do statistical work, but helping to inform managers, workers, and anybody else who would listen and apply his thoughts, sharing his knowledge in that way, and through that, hopefully having a big impact. What is your feeling about the role of short courses as a productive means of outreach?
I think they're wonderful. I used to do a lot of that stuff myself. I believe short courses are very important. Now the trick is, what are we going to pass on our short courses? We could teach regression. We could teach the t-test, and we could show them the software programs that are appropriate to that. But will the student who takes the course, when he reports on his results, know what the standard error is? Will he be willing to draw a distribution of belief around his suggestions? Will he have a sense of statistical thinking at all? Are we emphasizing those things? And the thing that worries me, of course, is that if we teach the courses purely from an informatics point of view, a computer point of view, I believe that's too narrow. And so I would be apprehensive of short courses in that area. If I had my way, I would have short courses that involve both the strategies, both approaches. So, and I believe the only way to get across to that very large audience out there, the 7,500 hospitals, my goodness, you'll have to give some short courses. And the individuals coming out of the university campuses with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and even PhD degrees in informatics and so on, their numbers will be limited in the future, and of course they're going to be valuable additions to our larger fraternity, our larger statistical fraternity. No, I'm not opposed to short courses at all. Matter of fact, it's the only way to get to that larger audience is to bring it to them. Very good.
Okay, I have a question. This is Mehmet Şahinoğlu, Informatics Institute. Okay. I'm the founder director of Informatics Institute, Auburn University, Montgomery. I hope you don't mind me asking a question. First of all, very pleased to see you again after the Jacksonville conference. We met and spoke in 2007, October, and you're always looking younger. Let me ask my question. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing.
Okay. I often heard, read, and saw on TV that Deming, before he created the miracles in Japan, including Taguchi, which you may not have mentioned, the US Big Three, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, denied Dr. Deming a chance to be heard, with the rumor that the Big Three, they had excellent engineers, and they did not need a statistician to override their automotive experience. Is there a truth to this? It looks like there is after the demise of GM. So why did these Big Three deny him a chance?
If I get the question, why did General Motors turn down Dr. Deming before, in the years before his trip to Japan? And that was the whole point of Dr. Deming's anger, I think. It's
Yes.
management, damn it. An interesting parallel is why did General Motors and Chrysler recently suffer the economic difficulties they've been having? And the answer is management. I don't see the connection here. I think that the American industry was blind to the ways of increasing quality that required the education of the workforce and the willingness of the workforce to adapt itself to the problems. That large educational activity, which the Japanese had done so thoroughly and so well, was completely missing here in the United States, and they were just ignorant of the possibilities of doing it on their own. They were foolish in ignoring Dr. Deming. I can tell you another experience I had with Ford many years later. The Ford Motor Company invited all its consultants to a meeting, and there were more people at that meeting than there are here. And it cost them a fortune because they had all their consultants. And so we all thought, wondering, what's the word? And I forget who the gentleman was, the president of Ford, and so he said, I bet you're wondering why we brought you all here. Right? I'll tell you why we brought you all here. We've been telling our employees that we mean it with respect to the Deming philosophy. We really mean it. The trouble with our employees is that they don't hear us quite as clearly as we want. You talk to them all the time. We want you to tell them that we mean it. And can you imagine the fortune they spent on getting that message across? So although General Motors may have been naive before the war, the auto industry was certainly not naive about these possibilities post-war. At least Ford wasn't. I don't know that I'm not. We're having a conversation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question. The Schuhart techniques are getting 100 years old soon, although some amendments like custom. Do you agree that Dr. Deming would propose a new methodology for the new century? Thank you.
Stu, I do have an observation to make.
I can't catch the question. Did Dr. Deming offer a new philosophy for the new century? Well, yes.
Stu, I have an observation to make.
Would he be here? What would he be saying today? I think he'd be all over us about the level of quality education, particularly with respect to the health industry. He was stabbed once in New York City. Someone tried to rob Dr. Deming. That's hilarious. If you knew this gentleman, you wouldn't think of it. Anyway, this guy came up and he stabbed Dr. Deming. And so Dr. Deming was, of course, fought the guy off, found himself bleeding seriously, got into a cab, got to a hospital, and he almost lost his life. And so while he was on repair, he wrote this little article about what's wrong with hospital management. And he talked about the nurses, how they would forget something, or the nurse would say, I'll be right back to that, Dr. Deming, and she'd go off and something would distract her and she wouldn't get right back. And difficulties with communicating with the doctors, and the pharmaceutical records getting lost, and the wrong prescriptions being filled. He has it all in this little paper. So Dr. Deming was conscious of the health and medical problems, the quality health and medical problems. Excuse me, go ahead.
The doctors, of course, were trained to believe that they knew all of the right answers, and the nurses found it difficult to suggest otherwise if there was a problem.
That's correct.
As you know, Stu, I lived my entire statistical life either at the Duke University Hospital or at the Mayo Clinic, and instead of making progress toward the recognition and value of statistics, I think we've been losing ground during the last several years, and at least partly it's because of a word that they use in the medical profession. They use the word stat. And what that means is immediately. And of course, the elegant slide you had up there where we think about things, we examine things, we question things, we ask for more data, we ask for better information before we finally reach a decision. That's hardly stat, and yet it's statistics. And they don't like that very much. That process drives them bananas, and yet we still published a lot of papers together. So I think they need us, but I don't know that they quite recognize that yet.
Boy, I would agree. I sympathize with that entirely. They draw down on their prior knowledge and their prior experience. If the data were available, and it will be available one day, there will be a reference distribution for data of this particular kind that can be accessed and looked at. And the alternatives that other doctors, under very similar conditions, have employed, that knowledge could be transmitted to the doctor I'm facing right now. I view their problem as they have a small sample of data. Right? And somehow or other, on the basis of that small sample, they have to make an inference and a decision. Well, what prior do they bring to this? Their experience, but it's a personal, limited experience. They're not drawing down on the experience of the society of doctors. Oh, no, only his experience counts. And how we break around this problem is I'm open to suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter, for the very stimulating talk. I'd like you to continue the line you've just started. I'm a newly minted second-year assistant professor, and I'm challenged by the dilemma that you've put before my society that I'll be part of for many years to come. And you've talked about short courses. Do you have some other ideas or directions, suggestions for those of us at the beginning of our career might be pursuing in order to avert the problem that you've shown?
What would I do if I were 19 or 20 or 24 years old and in this situation? What would I do? Well, one thing I'd do, I promise you, I'd be more respectful of the role of the computer in computing and its ability to assist me in my decisions and so forth than I would likely be if I were simply a student of statistics or simply a student of medicine. There's no doubt in my mind that this device, as Dr. Friedman sort of naively suggests in his paper, this device called the computer is going to can make a tremendous change in how well we do our jobs and how well we fulfill our mission. And so I think the intersection of the arts of computing and statistics will have to be enhanced, and I would spend a great deal of time keeping up with both. But and then I wouldn't be afraid to teach. That's the only thing about it. I wouldn't be afraid to, get out and rattle the cage occasionally. If I saw something locally at a hospital or something like that, which seemed to me to be out of character. So that's a good question. I don't have a clear answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last question. Okay.
Peter Emery, Cleveland Clinic. Aside from seconding Dr. O'Fallon's comment to my right, it strikes me that the single greatest obstacle to exploiting informatics to improve the quality of healthcare is the poor quality of computerized data in medicine and imparting a quality ethic into the information in the first place. And it's hard to teach short courses about that. Can you give us some guidance and encouragement to that?
The raw data themselves are
they stink.
the essential. What about the measurement standards? And how much effort is really made between clinical laboratories across hospitals? Does anybody know? I spent a year once here in Washington at the Committee on National Statistics, and our mission was to look at the EPA laboratories. And we were looking at the EPA laboratories with respect to their measurements. If you measured BOD in New Jersey and you measured biological oxygen demand in Tennessee, you couldn't compare the measurements. The same sample in the two different places gave remarkably different answers. So what are the efforts of standardization of measurements made on the patient across hospitals? Nobody knows, and it scares you to think about it. So there's a great deal of work ahead of us, there's no doubt about that, and much of this labor has statistical overtones which are profound, and it just offers a wonderful opportunity for us to serve our societies. Very good. Thank you, gang, for being here. I'm going to take your picture. Don't go away. Everybody smile. Thank you.